Hello Year 5, I hope you are well. Today we are going to be looking at suffixes. So, what do we already know? So, I would like you to revise these questions. What is a noun? What is an adjective? What is a verb? And what is a suffix? Pause the video and see if you can write down a definition to answer all 4 of those questions. So what do we already know? So we know that a noun is the name of a person, animal, place, thing, or an idea. Okay, so we have our objects here. So we have our guitar, our cake, our chair, and our flower. We have the names of places. We have England. We have the name of a person. We have John. We have the names of animals as well. So we have a frog, we have an owl, and we have a dog. So a noun is the name of a person or an object or an animal. So what do we already know about adjectives? We know that this is a word that describes a verb or describes a noun. So this gives more information about a noun or a pronoun. So here is just a short list of some of those adjectives that we've been using in our writing this year. We know that verbs are a doing word. This is going to describe what a person or a thing is actually doing or being. We've looked at plenty of these terms, so verb should be an easy one to remember. Now, suffixes might not be something that you've looked at so far. So a suffix is a group of letters or a word that is an ending and it's added on to the end of a word to make a new word. And usually this changes the meaning of the original word. So for example, we have less and full. So we could have careless, which means that they are without care, or they could be careful, therefore they are full of care. Then we've changed the meanings of both of those words, that you can either have no care or you can have lots of care. So just by adding those 2 different suffixes, we've changed the meaning of the original root word. So a suffix is added to the end of a root word, could be part of a word, it could be the whole word, and it's going to form a new word. And like I explained, it's going to change the grammatical features and functions of that word. For example, if we take the suffix dom, this means a place or state of being. Let's add it to the end of free, and the new word we get is freedom. So we've now created a new word that something being free usually means it has no monetary value to it, but having freedom means that you have the opportunity to go and do whatever you want with no constrictions. So we've changed the meaning of the original root word by adding on that suffix. So we're going to explore these 3 suffixes today. So we have ISE, IFY and ATE. So these are the 3 suffixes we're going to look at, and it's important to understand what these suffixes actually mean because these suffixes change the meanings of the original words. So think about the different words which can be created through adding these above suffixes. So we have sterilize and fossilize, liquidate, activate, magnify and glorify. So those 3 suffixes have changed the meanings of those words. So eyes means to make, so to cause, to become. So when we have to sterilize something, we are changing it. It has a cause and an outcome. IFY means to make or become. So when we magnify something, it's becoming something, we make it magnified. And when we have ATE, that's looking at something in terms of what it becomes. So if we liquidate something or we activate something, it's changing what the outcome is. So there is usually a spelling rule that applies when we are adding suffixes onto the end of our words. For example, words ending in Y, we tend to change the Y to an I before we add the ending. Therefore, memory, taking off the Y, adding our suffix becomes memorize. When we have words ending in an E, we tend to remove that E and just simply add the ending on. So rather than simple with the E, we take the E off and we just add the suffix. Now, words that end with a short vowel sound, we then have to double the consonants. If we add the suffix ing, that starts with a short vowel sound. So we need to double up on the consonant letter before we add our suffix. So here for swim, we've added an additional M, so we now have double the consonant, and then we've added our suffix on. So those are 2 or 3 of our rules when we are looking at the spelling of a word. So for IFY, you can change nouns and adjectives into verbs, and we can do this by adding this suffix. So for example, We have humid and the suffix added together would spell humidify. So we've changed humid, which is a noun, into an adjective. So it could be an adjective or a noun, and we've now changed it into a verb by adding on our suffix. Here we have the ice cube is solid. Solid is describing the ice cube, so we have it as an adjective. If I then add on my suffix, I've changed it to solidify. So I solidify the water by freezing it. Here I've changed the adjective solid and I've actually turned it into a verb. So I've turned it into a doing word. However, the root word sometimes has to change before we add on our suffix. So this one was quite simple because all we had to do was add our suffix onto the end. Here, however, we have to sometimes change the spellings of our original root words before we can add our suffix. So sometimes we have to double check our spellings before we recreate our new word. So here's a quick recap of the spelling words. So the first one, we can simply just add on our suffix onto the end to create our new word. Sometimes though, if our word ends in an E, we have to remove that before we add our suffix on to create our new word. And sometimes when we have our Y, we usually have to remove that as well before we add on our suffix to also create ourselves a new word. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the screen. I would like you to change these words by using the spelling rules and add the suffix ify onto the root words and have a think about which spelling rule you had to apply most often. Okay, so let's see what you came up with. So a lot of these words, purify, notify, diversify, intensify, falsify, simplify, we had to change the E, didn't we? So we had to take our E off before adding on our suffix. This one here, we had to change our Y and we had to take our Y off and add an I. So the spelling rule there is usually taking the E off before we add our additional letters on. So not only can we use the suffix ify to create ourselves a verb, we can also add the suffix ate to change our nouns and adjectives into a verb. For example, active and ate, we take the E off and we change it to activate. So for example, he was turned away with his invalid ticket. So invalid there, we've taken it from a noun and we're going to turn it into a verb by adding on our suffix. He tore up his ticket to invalidate it. So here, all we had to do was add our suffix onto the end to change our noun or our adjective into a verb. However, just like the rule with our ify suffix, sometimes we have to change the spellings of the root word before we can add our suffix. For example, medical and ate, we would have to take off the L and it becomes medicate. Same with pollen and ate, we have to change the spelling of pollinate by removing the IEN, adding the ate changes it to pollinate. So here for the spelling words, when we're looking at the ate suffix, sometimes you can just add the suffix onto the end and that would create your new word. Sometimes we have to think about whether we need to remove the E to then create our new word when we add on our suffix. And sometimes we have to change the ends of our words. For example, hibernation, we have to take the entire Asian section off the end of our word to add ate onto it to create hibernate. So it's tricky sometimes when you have to look out for the spellings that we need to change. But let's see how well you get on with this. So I'd like you to pause the video. Can you apply that new spelling rule by learning to add the suffix ate onto these root words and have a think about which spelling rule is actually the trickiest one to apply? Okay, so let's go through these. So we have invalid, which becomes invalidate. So here, we're just adding on our suffix. Here we have hyphen. Again, we're just adding on our suffix. Alienate, exactly the same rule. Captive becomes captivate. So there we had to take our E off before we added on our suffix. Let's see if we think the same thing applies for motive. See, motive, we took the E off and we added our suffix onto the end. Now, communication, going back to our rule, this has got Asian on the end, so I wonder if this rule is going to apply here where I have to take a whole section off. So communication would become, communicate. So I've had to take that entire Asian part of my sentence off to then replace it with ate. Now elastic becomes elasticate. Here, very simple, just adding on our suffix. Graduation, I wonder if that's going to be the same rule we applied here. See, graduate, just adding the ATE, we had to take off the Asian from graduate as well. Now, personally, I think that rule's the hardest one. When you're actually changing the spelling of the word, rather than adding on a suffix or just taking away one letter, sometimes we have to take away a group of letters. Now, we've looked at IFY, we've looked at adding ATE. There's one more suffix we're going to look at today. And like all the other two, we can also change our adjectives and nouns into verbs by adding the suffix ISE. So here we have magnets and eyes. Here we are just adding on our suffix onto the end. Now, the proper noun needs to begin with a capital letter. I'm now going to change the adjective capital. I'm going to turn it into a verb. So she needs to capitalise the proper noun. So by adding that suffix ISI onto the end, I've changed capital from a verb or an adjective into capitalise, which has now turned into a verb. However, just like the rules on the other two that we looked at, sometimes the root word needs to be changed before we can add the suffix. So hypnotic, adding on the eyes, we have to take off the end of our word, so we have to take off the IC before we can add on our suffix. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video and I'd like you to have a go at one of the worksheets. It is your choice as to which worksheet you choose to complete. 1 star is an easier worksheet, 2 stars is a medium leveled worksheet, and 3 stars is the hardest worksheet. Please try and pick the appropriate activity for you to complete. So let's have a go at putting this into practice before you do your final activity. When you change the underlined noun into a verb by adding a suffix, what would the correct spelling be? So Amy warned us that birds terror her. I'd like you to pause the video. Which is the correct spelling with the suffix on for the word we're looking for? Well, let's see if you got it correct. The word is terrify. So Amy warned us that birds terrify her. Well done, Year 5, if you got that correct. Number 2, I want to speciality in ballet at my dancing school. Now, that does not make sense. What would the correct word be? Pause the video and see if you can work out what the correct spelling would be. Okay, well done Year 5 if you clicked specialise. Now these both say specialise, but in the UK we do not spell it with a Z, so this spelling here is the correct one. So we have added our ISE spelling suffix onto the end. Number 3, the band needs to advert for their new member. So here I now need to add on a suffix. Pause the video and see which spelling is the correct suffix. Well done to those of you that clicked advertise. So if we need to advertise, we're changing that into a verb. We need to add the suffix ISE. Number 4, the singer wanted to dedication the song to his wife. Now I know this is my Asian rule, so I need to have a think about this one. Pause the video and see if you can identify the correct spelling with the right suffix. Well done to those of you that clicked dedicate. So the singer wanted to dedicate the song to his wife. Okay, that is the end of our lesson for today, Year 5. So what I would like you to do is, using all of that information that you've learnt today, I would like you to go back and have a go at the activity. So what you need to do is you need to proofread the paragraph to check the spellings of the words written with the suffixes that we have learnt today. What I would like to do is underline the suffixes and then use a dictionary to check the correct spelling and write it in your books. If it's easier, write down that paragraph into your book, underline those keywords, and then complete the rest of the activity. Good luck, Year 5.